All right, welcome back. Now we're going to BAM this schmizzle in Max. So I'm going to boot up my Maxage and we'll get it loaded up. Probably should have done that before I started recording, but hey, you don't have anything better to do than watch my Max load, listen to my old hard drives spool up and take forever. Tickety tickety tick. Maybe I'll pause it. No, it's happening now. It's quick. Very quick. Come on, load you thing. Damn, she's slow today. Alright, in the meantime, I'm going to go and get the textures themselves. So I have my World Machine folder, my World Machine documents, and I got my height, color images there ready to roll. So, now that we're in Max, we'll just start by creating a plane. We'll drag it out anywhere. Let's make sure it's at 0, 0. And we'll just call this terrain. In the properties for that terrain. Now the texture I created was 1025 by 1025 and my Max is currently working in centimeters. So if I did that now, it would be about 1.5 meters. I could set my Max units to be meters or kilometers and get it all completely accurate. For the moment, I'm not going to worry about it because I know that this works and it's totally fine. You could always scale the object up if you needed to. And if you make it too big to start with, you're going to end up with camera clipping issues. You won't actually be able to see the whole thing. So, work the way you want to. I'm not the boss here. So I'm going to set this to be 1024 by 1024. Even though my texture is a little bit larger than that, that's totally fine. I'm going to maximize this thing here. And let's start by throwing a material on there. I use the old school material editor because I'm old school. I will expand out the map section and I will drag the color onto the diffuse channel. And I'm actually going to drag the height map into the bump for this, but I'm going to turn it off. I'm really only doing that so that I have access to it. I basically brought it into Max now. So the next thing we're going to do is apply a modifier. It's going to be a displace modifier. So your menu set might look different to mine. I have show all sets in list ticked, which means it categorizes the different modifiers. So I sometimes have to look for stuff. I think it's in here somewhere. Displace. This displace modifier will take a texture and apply displacement to the object, like so. I could specify a bitmap or I can drag a map in here. So I'll drag the height map in there. I'll make it an instance, which means that any changes I make to this texture will be reflected in this one. Cool. So I can modify the strength of this to control the displacement, but before I do that, I want to talk briefly about the fact that this has some interesting UV mapping settings. So by default, when you apply a displace modifier, it will try and apply a UV coordinate to it to make it fit. So I generally tick use existing mapping because that will be the same mapping as, say, the color texture that you've applied, or you can apply new mapping, which would, if you put it into the channel 1, it would also affect the texture as well. So you've got a little bit of control within this for how you're actually mapping the displacement on. So let's set this to, let's check in World Machine. What was my original world height? If I go to my project settings and general setup, maximum elevation was 2,625. So if I made my world 12 kilometers, so it's like 1024, then it would be, wow, it'd be like 2048 or something like that. All right, let's try that. Strength, 2048. All right, that's ridiculous. Let's try 240. There we go. All right, so we can see a very low resolution representation of what our displacement would look like. But the cool thing is we can go back to this plane because it's a modifier and set the modifiers to something like 12 and 12. We're starting to see a much better indication of what the terrain should look like. Say I set it to something like 32 by 32. We're getting a really good look at it. And if I were to throw in a turbo smooth modifier here, I don't have to change the original values of the terrain. So if I set it to something like 64 by 64, then the turbo smooth is applied, which adds more detail to it before the displacement. So you can see that effect there, that little extra bit on the edges. I'm wondering if that's apply mapping, and I'll fit it. Maybe it's to do with the mapping. I've fixed this problem before, but I'm trying to remember. They do a blur on it. And RGB intensity, no filtering. No filtering, yes. We turn the filtering off because it'll blur the edges and make those numbers a bit skew-if. So the good thing about working this way is I can have an overall view of what the contour of my terrain will look like, and I can turn the turbo smooth on at whichever point I want to in order to get a much more detailed view. So you can see that that looks very much like what I had in World Machine. And it's running pretty well now, but if you had tons more detail, you'd probably want to tweak that down a little bit. So I'm going to leave that at 2. And for render iterations, those are ones that it's going to apply when I actually render it. So if I set this turbo smooth down to 1, we can see that there. And then if I render it, it's, oh, look at that. It's even applied my texture. You can see that it's a lot more detailed. So if I want to see the texture in here, I would come up and turn on the preview material, and we can see it there. So if I take my turbo smooth and set it to 0, but the render iterations are 3, see it's all nasty and low poly, but when I render it, oh, look at the beautiful detail. Oh, it's very nice. It's very, very nice. One other thing that I'm going to cover briefly, and I probably should put it in a separate video, but I'll do it here anyway, is that we can generate a normal map. How do we do that? Where's the button for that? Output? No? Converter? Ah, here we go. Normal map maker. Now, if you work in game engines, you know what a normal map is. It's the same. It's essentially the same as a height map or a bump map, but it uses the 3 different color channels in the texture to represent different directions in the height, which actually gives it more flexibility when it comes to applying a pixel shader and doing real-time effects on it. So it's basically like a bump map, only way better up. So I'm going to take my erosion output, which is the final result of my height field, plug it into the normal map maker, and then let's have a look here. So we can see, I'll just rebuild it, that it's taking all of that detailed information and mapping it to the red, green, and blue channels. So let's go back here and go to our outputs. We'll have another color output, and I'll drag this one in there to the RGB input. I'll change it to a 16-bit PNG, and I'll make this one height test 1 normal map. Write output to disk. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, file written successfully. Go back here, World Machine documents, got my normal. Blam, come back there and bring up my material. Come back, and I will actually drag this in there to start with. It wants to go in my bump, but it won't actually work right now. I need to tell the renderer that it's a normal map and have it used like that. So I'm actually going to do the same thing. And where's that filtering? I'll turn the filtering to none, and then I'll click on the bitmap and choose a different map that this will then be a child of. So I'll go to normal bump, and it wants me, do I want to discard the old one or keep it as a submap? I want to keep it. So I've got that now, and I can go back up here, and now I'll actually turn the color off, and I'll actually turn the turbo smooth off as well, so that hopefully we can see the effect that this has. When I render it, you see that there's all this fine detail on there. It's using the normal map to give more detail to the surface than was actually there originally, or is there in the geometry. It's also smoothing out and giving nice contours to a lot of these areas that are incredibly low poly. So if I were to turn the turbo smooth on as well, this map is only going to augment the high resolution detail that's there and give some more little extra nooks and crannies, which is really nice. I'll turn the color map back on. We'll do that, and we can see that working nicely there. Now this is all set up without any kind of lighting. So even without any lights in your scene at all, you can see how, you know, how awesome the results that you can get are really quickly. And these are relatively low resolution textures, particularly for a terrain. So what I might do is, should I cover rendering? No, I'll do rendering in another video. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that it's helped you so that you've got a quick crash course in World Machine. Now, you could take this model right now and export it to a game engine and just use it as a static mesh. But if you prefer to use the output from World Machine, those 16-bit RAWs, and bring them directly into something like Unity or Unreal, they have the ability to process those, generate terrains for you, and do the level of detail. So I'll cover that in a future video, but for the moment, I hope that you've gotten something out of this, and I will catch you on the flip. Peace!